Hey guys, welcome to a live screen test. I appreciate those of you with no warning that have managed to tune in. I'm super interested to see how this comes out for all of you. So if you wouldn't mind dropping a comment and just letting me know, how does this look? How does this sound? We are in the process of planning a new daily market recap show coming soon to different platforms. Just testing some of the technology and seeing how things play out. But I appreciate you guys hanging with me and for following my work wherever you're at on YouTube, on the Twitters, on Facebook, and elsewhere. Just a quick market recap here. Obviously, a V-shaped day to the market environment as we're looking at the main dashboard here. Here's the initial sell-off after the inflation data this morning. Of course, certain areas of the market actually were showing remarkable strength right out of the open, particularly things like renewable energy. I would call that the Harris bump in renewable energy and electric vehicles and others, which ended up having a pretty decent day even earlier in the day when the rest of sectors were actually in the red. Going quickly through how things played out, though, you can see the S&P 500 finishing up about 1.1%. The NASDAQ composite even stronger, doubling that return a little bit more, up 2.2%. The VIX actually spent some of the day above 20, actually up to around 21 and a half almost, before coming down. So the volatility of the volatility, the VIX of the VIX, as it were, is actually as noisy as ever. A lot of movement once again. And what's interesting is we're toying with that kind of key level that I think of as so important, 20. That's sort of the back of the envelope level that I like to watch. A VIX above 20 tells me we're in pullback mode, at least, if not something worse. Tells me to be thinking about potential downside targets and reflecting on where we may go from there. VIX below 20 is sort of a market's okay, right? And then at the very worst, we're sort of in a choppy, maybe brief pullback, but that overall low volatility if the VIX is below 20. So by the end of the day, again, early signs were distribution with elevated volatility. By the close, that sell-off out of the open getting bought very, very quickly. Continuing the drama leading into tomorrow's inflation number, the PPI, and then going into next week, obviously the next Fed meeting with a most likely 25 basis point cut. Looking at interest rates, you can see the entire yield curve had pushed higher. And since I've been doing a show here in the last couple of weeks, a couple of things, if not a lot of things, have happened. But one in particular is the fact that the yield curve no longer inverted, depending on how you actually make that comparison. I usually look at the 2-year point versus the 10-year point, which has been inverted for a couple of years now. It actually just came out of that inversion. Good friend to market misbehavior, Katie Stockton, mentioned earlier this week how that yield curve becoming no longer inverted. Going back in market history often happens just before a fairly aggressive market sell-off when we have gone into a recession, that the yield curve actually usually rights itself, actually becomes more normalized before the market really starts to deteriorate. Look back to 2000, 2001, look back to 2007, 2008 for examples of how that rotation has happened previously in market history. Looking at the commodity space, gold slightly lower, but the rest of the commodity space finishing generally in the green. Cryptocurrencies all were selling off pretty good before or actually during the U.S. market open. Equity open from around 9:30 to 11:30 Eastern, we'll call it. But had a nice rally along with other risk assets in the afternoon Eastern time. Currently settling right around where we finished today yesterday, just below, we'll call it 57,500, just slightly below there. Looking at the 11 S&P sectors, again, the configuration, the dynamics of this market changed quite a bit through the course of the day. You can see technology ended up being by far the winner, and it wasn't even close. The XLK was up over 3% today, 3.4% higher. NVIDIA had a pretty strong day after an initial period of weakness out of the open. Consumer discretionary and communication services, your three fangy growth sectors, all at the top of the list. 5 out of the 11 S&P sectors finished in the red, with some defensive stuff, particularly consumer staples at the bottom of the list, tied with energy for the worst day. Again, one thing to note is as of last Friday, and I update my market trend model every Friday after the close, with last Friday's rotation, really the weakness through the course of most of last week, the short-term model for me has turned bearish on all the major U.S. equity indexes. S&P large cap, the SP mid cap, there are also 2000 small cap, and the NASDAQ 100. The NASDAQ 100 actually turned bearish on the medium-term time frame as well. Now, for me, the short-term model turning negative, it's kind of like the VIX popping above 20. It tells me we're probably in a bit of a pullback, but until the medium-term model turns for me, it still tells me, generally speaking, it's safe to remain risk on, to be looking for good upside opportunities as opposed to downside opportunities. Looking quickly at some of the comments, I appreciate some of you guys bringing comments in from YouTube and elsewhere. Oh, I can actually look at your picture and everything. That's actually pretty cool. I'm getting familiar with this as we go. And I actually didn't say the weather in Redmond, Washington. Surprisingly enough, it is raining. It's a rainy Redmond, Washington. How did I miss the opportunity to share that data point with all of you? Apologies. I'll make a note to fix that when we go live with the actual show. Just to finish off here on this brief market recap test, and again, I appreciate you guys so much joining me for this for the first attempt. I wrote an article earlier today for CNBC Pro, and if you subscribe to CNBC Pro, you probably saw the headline there. A lot of areas of the market had sort of that Harris bump after Kamala Harris's pretty impressive performance, I guess, compared to some expectations. Whatever you think about the outcome or the experience of that debate, I certainly, as I was watching, was thinking about what would stand to change. What does this mean for the markets? Right, that's always my reaction as an investor to any sort of news-related event to like that. And I would tell you, immediately started to think of renewable energy areas of the market: solar stocks, wind, water, electric vehicles, and of course, pretty much everything I just mentioned having a really strong day. Even while other areas of the markets were actually struggling out of the open, something like First Solar gapped higher and was trading up about 7 or 8%, while the S&P was actually down out of the open. Now, by the end of the day, everything else started to improve, and you can see that FSLR, ended the day up about 15%. Going back, that's actually the top performer in the S&P 500, I believe, as I was looking at the information earlier. Also have to note things like NVIDIA, right? And what does the chart of NVIDIA tell you? For me, I'm immediately drawn to what I would say is becoming a more and more obvious symmetrical triangle or a coil pattern. And if you're familiar with that, or if you're not, I'll give you the quick technical analysis 101. A coil or symmetrical triangle pattern, boy, I'm gonna just fudge these in the interest of time, is basically where you have a big move of any direction, right? It doesn't matter if it's going up or going down, but when you get into this particular area, what happens to the trend? And as you can see here, and thanks someone who mentioned make the charts bigger, appreciate that feedback. What you can see on the chart of NVIDIA is after the big move higher, we have this consolidation, lower highs, higher lows. And look at how, while we chopped around here, sort of around that 125 to 130 level, this was in late August. Look at how that ended up kind of confirming this pattern. Instead of breaking out and continuing higher, it kind of stalled out here. You have this really clear bearish engulfing pattern, which NVIDIA has actually featured at a lot of swing peaks, going back to this one in July, back to this one in June as well. Now we're settling into this pattern of higher lows and lower highs, consolidating around this area. Now, this pattern in some ways is one of the easiest patterns because all you do is wait to see which way it breaks. At some point, this pattern will be naturally kind of violated to the upside, where we break above the upper boundary, or to the downside, breaking below the lower boundary. Now, if we would break to the upside, you have to remember we have additional resistance to think about. 130 is that swing high in August. I would argue that's probably going to be pretty important. This sort of 135-ish range, which is the high from June and July, right around that same point. Those are potential resistance areas above. If we break down, the 200-day moving average looming large around $90 a share for NVIDIA. So I would say at best, NVIDIA is sort of a consolidating sideways move at this point. The rally that you saw today, let's bear in mind, let's remember, it was a one-day move, and I think that's the reality for a lot of charts that I could show you. Even something like First Solar, right? Impressive one-day gain, absolutely right. But did it really change the medium-term picture, right? Did it break above resistance and signify that there's additional accumulation at work there? I would argue not quite yet. That's our abbreviated market recap. I want to thank those of you that joined me live here. I did an unannounced test just to try new software, new hardware, new everything, just to see how things played out. Very keen to know what you think of this. And if you have any feedback, drop a comment wherever you're watching this, and I'll be actively looking for it. For Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well, stay safe, have a good one.